Hey everybody, and welcome back to another season of the Press Enterprise High School Football Video Podcast. I am Press Enterprise Sports Editor Tim Hare, and with me as always, Assistant Editor Dan Reilly.
Back
Dan,
for more.
back and better than ever. Well, it remains to be seen. But,
Yeah.
First a little housekeeping before we get into the football talk. I know we'd said there was going to be a podcast, actually two podcasts last week, but we just kind of got caught up in putting out the season preview and the first playbook. Ran out of time, so I know I tweeted about it. It didn't happen. This is the first podcast of the 2016 season. So with that out of the way, let's talk some football.
Let's do it.
You saw Berwick last week,
I did.
and I think we all had Berwick voted number one in our individual power polls.
Mm-hmm.
They were number one in the overall power poll, obviously. So we thought they were going to be good.
Yeah.
I think, just based on the score, that they, at least after 1 week, look better than we anticipated.
Absolutely. I think you said it perfectly because, they got off to a very quick start last week. And there was a lot of uncertainty about the offense, because we didn't really know how the players would react to Frank Sheptock's new offense, which is a no huddle. Players handled it very well, obviously. Got off to a very quick start. I think they scored on something like 4 of their first possessions. Never looked back. So they're very strong on the line, both sides of the line. Their defense played out of their mind, and I'm sure Coach Sheptock in his debut was very happy to see that.
Now, what I was because I had their media day,
Uh-huh.
what I was most intrigued to see was how they were going to use Mike Force this year. I kind of got the feeling that, they moved him to wide receiver away from quarterback, and I felt like they were going to use him almost like Ohio State used Braxton Miller.
Yeah.
Lined him up, outside, put him in the slot, put him in the backfield sometimes, have him run some wildcat. Did they vary the looks with what they did with Force, or is that something they're maybe holding off on down the road?
I, in particular, didn't notice exactly where he was in every single formation, but Force did catch a touchdown pass, and I think what you're saying, they can certainly use him in different positions all over the field.
Well, they can run him. They can put him in a jet sweep look. They can, obviously, he can throw the ball. He was their starting quarterback last year. He can catch it.
Yep.
So it just makes it kind of seems like they're going to use him in a lot of different roles on that offense.
What's working to Force's benefit is having Anthony Cecchini on his team as well, because Cecchini, there he is wide open in the end zone, catches a touchdown in the first, I believe it was the first quarter. So when you're an opposing defense trying to key in on Mike Force, obviously Berwick has other playmakers on that team, and in the receiving game, it's going to work out to Force's benefit that they can't solely, they can cover him all they want, double cover him, triple cover him, or whatever, but it's going to open up opportunities elsewhere on the offense for Berwick. So I think Force is a very talented wide receiver, and he caught, I think it was 2 balls maybe, and one of them went for a long touchdown, so he's showing glimpses of his older brother, Andrew.
Now, let's talk a little about the team that you typically cover.
Yes.
Danville, I cherry-picked them last week.
Yep.
I took that Danville-Bloom game from you. But you typically are the beat writer.
Mm-hmm.
And just with what they have back, I think that everyone has high expectations for Danville. I picked them in our season preview to win the Heartland 2.
Yep.
What do you think they're going to do this year?
I mean, it's tough to argue with you picking them as the division champs. I mean,
well, now that Heartland is
sure,
tough because you have a very intriguing Southern
right.
team.
Yeah, you've got a Montoursville team in there that's obviously not.
Right, they returned Bryson Musina, which you start with that.
Sure.
That's a great building block.
Very experienced. Yep.
A good Lewisburg team that is not as bad as the team that allowed 7 sacks to Hughesville last week.
Right.
And a very intriguing Mount Carmel team that's getting really good quarterback play from John Ayers.
And the class realignment, which did that narrowed down the total number of teams that can get into the playoffs. Is that correct?
Well, not everyone from Heartland 2 is going to get into so Southern's
Sure.
District 4 2A, but Montoursville I believe is 3A.
Right. Yeah.
So
league-wise-
that varies as far as
Okay.
district. This is just for the Heartland 2. But I can tell you, having seen Danville last week, I was both very impressed and a little underwhelmed, which seems strange to say because they were impressive in that Trent Hilkert runs for almost 250 yards, Gannon Feldman runs for almost 100. They have 500 total yards. And yet, and Jim Kaiser talked about you only have that one scrimmage. You're going to be a little sloppy, and they certainly were. They left a lot of points on the board. 2 interceptions inside the 10. 2 long Trent Hilkert touchdown runs that got negated by penalties.
Yep.
I don't think those are the kind of mistakes Danville's going to make in week 8. But they very nearly gave one away to a team that only ran 9 plays in the second half.
Yeah, I can certainly see why that's a concern. Although if Danville were to do the same thing again this week against South Williamsport not being able to capitalize on some of those opportunities, I would be really surprised because that's something that Coach Kaiser, the rest of his coaching staff are always harping on his guys to. You got to finish those drives, and especially when you're a team that runs the wing T offense, when you're burning off huge amounts of time on the clock, or putting up 15 play series, whatever. You'd like to come away with points on those. So, like I said, I would be surprised if that's the case. For the next couple of weeks. I understand. Obviously, there's going to be growing pains and not having that extra week for evaluation, as Coach Kaiser had put it, hurts. But it's a team that has got a lot of experience, and I think guys that certainly can find their way into the end zone and correct those mistakes.
Now, week 1 is typically the most. It's the week that's filled with the most surprises, just because you come in and you don't know the teams.
Yeah.
You know who the starters are going to be. You have some returning kids, but there's so much unknown, and you can only go based on your expectations.
Yes.
And sometimes those expectations, you get some surprises. What was your biggest surprise from week 1? Because there were a couple.
Yeah.
I know when I saw the tweets about Southern losing at halftime to Shamokin.
Sure. That was a big surprise.
I almost dropped my bottle of water.
Very surprised. I was surprised when I heard that too. Mount Carmel coming back to win that game in overtime, a little surprising. I wouldn't say it's my biggest surprise. I'd have to go Central, just because new coach, whole new program, or whole new system that they've got to learn. Central's got some very talented players, and I think we were probably unsure in terms of, how are they going to respond to Scott Dennis as the new coach, and how is Scott Dennis going to put the players in position to maximize everything that they do?
Not just that, but let's not mince words. They couldn't run the ball last year.
Yeah.
Central ran for less than 1,000 yards last year. So, they were playing a Mifflinburg team that returned a lot up front on both sides of the ball and a 1,000-yard back. A lot of people kind of had Mifflinburg as a dark horse in that Heartland 1. And, Central ends up coming back and winning by a point. I'd like to make the point that, we had 3 coaches making their debuts for teams in the press enterprise coverage area.
Yep.
You have Frank Sheptalk at Berwick, who we'd mentioned.
Scott Dennis at
Central. And DJ Flick at Warrior Run.
Yes.
Of those 3 coaches that won their debuts, whose win do you think was the most impressive? Just taking into account the job they inherited and just the result on the field.
I'm going to have to go Dennis because, for me it's a toss-up between Dennis and Flick.
I say Flick.
Yeah. I mean, you look at what that first game that Warrior Run had against Muncie this year, and then look at what happened last year.
Because Muncie returned a lot from a team that went to the district playoffs.
Complete 180.
And beat Warrior Run by 5 touchdowns last year. And I was talking to a lot of guys in the Lycoming County area who cover high school football, and I was like, Muncie's going to win this thing, right?
Yeah.
And they were like, they knew DJ Flick as a player. They knew him as an assistant at Montgomery, and they said, don't discount the DJ Flick factor. And he's kind of an unknown to me. Obviously, it's his first head coaching job in our area. I didn't do their media day.
I've never even talked to Coach Flick.
But they're 1-0. They play Milton this week. I think they improved to 2-0.
Yeah.
I think it would be the first time since 2007.
Right.
I think they're going to have an undefeated team after the
I agree.
game's over.
I agree with you.
in Turbot.
Yeah, and the other thing with Warrior Run is they had some good experience coming back. So I'm sure for Flick it was nice to have some of those players who were able to help with the transition, in terms of him being a first-year head coach. And then, the players aren't completely out of the loop. Players are still the ones who have to go on the field and win. So
you heard it here first. The players are the ones who go on the field. It is actually a penalty if the coaches do outside of a timeout.
It is.
This is the kind of information we bring you at the Press Enterprise.
Depending on how the officials see it.
Last question.
Yes.
Beard, thoughts? Go.
Getting grizzly.
Very grizzly.
How much longer?
And a little gray.
How much longer? Yeah, I know. I know we talk about my gray hairs.
I do have a birthday coming up.
You do. I know you had said about potentially keeping this for Halloween costumes.
Yes, I like to have some options, but it is getting itchy.
The viewers need to know if that's...
If you see me on the sideline at a game, know that my face is itchy 100% of the time, especially last week when it was 95 degrees at kickoff. I basically wanted to crawl out of my skin.
Have you narrowed down your costume choices?
I didn't even have time to record a podcast, let alone think of Halloween costumes.
Till next week.
So this has been the first of what we hope are many podcasts this season. But if you like what you heard here, you can get plenty more football information from us. You can go to pressenterpriseonline.com, where we have our extra points section of the website, where you can read that week's playbook. You can read our tweets from games. You can also follow us on Twitter. I'm at Tim Hare 87.
And
you
I'm
are
at Dan_Reilly 51.
And we also have Adam Roberts, Arthur Dowell, Justin Biter, sometimes Matt Belt. So check them out on Twitter.
Oh, the Press Enterprise Twitter also usually has updates from a game as well.
Correct. So, and there's also, if you're a little more old-fashioned, either get a subscription or go to the newsstand and get the actual tangible copy, or find a newsboy on the corner of the street who's yelling extra, extra, and give him a shiny nickel. But for Dan Reilly, I am sports editor Tim Hare, and until next week, we will see you later.